Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Today on Earth Focus, a sobering new report by the United Nations Environment Program says we'll feel the impact of climate change sooner than we thought. UNEP's report, the Climate Change Science Compendium, was released on September 24, 2009, just 2 months before the world comes together at Copenhagen to craft a global response to the climate challenge. UNEP Executive Director Achim Steiner speaks with Link TV correspondent Miles Benson about the report and about how the international community can respond.
Mr. Steiner, is it fair to say that Copenhagen, the gathering in Copenhagen in December, is going to test the theory that we have adequate global political mechanisms to deal with the kinds of problems that you're talking about in this compendium, a threat to the environment, to the whole world?
I think what in Copenhagen is really at stake is the ability of 190 plus nations acting in unison. Climate change is a phenomenon that, in a sense, defies national action in terms of going it alone. Whether you're the United States, or you are China, or you're the Maldives Islands or the Fiji Islands, we all know that we cannot solve global warming, and we certainly cannot turn away from a world that would warm to 2, 3, 4 degrees if we do not act together. So Copenhagen, yes, is the litmus test on whether there is a political will, but more importantly also whether there are answers and solutions to a world that still wants to eat, that wants to have lights on, that wants to have transport. Can we live in a world where we are reversing the global warming phenomenon and at the same time still improving the livelihoods of 6 and soon 9 billion people on this planet?
And if it turns out that the Copenhagen meeting is a disappointment, does that suggest to you that something new is needed in the way of a political institution or mechanism to get these things done?
In some ways, I think we always have to be careful that we don't fix a problem that is in the political domain or in the domain of the courage of leaders to take decisions by putting another institution in place. Nevertheless, in a world in which climate change has become such a major phenomenon, in which the financing that will drive our responses across all sectors of the economy, clearly we also will be faced, if there is a success in Copenhagen or if there is not a success in Copenhagen, in rethinking whether our institutional landscape, whether at the national level or indeed at the level of the international community, and particularly the United Nations, is geared up for the challenges that we face. Clearly, it is my conviction that over the next 20 to 30 years, environmental change is going to increasingly drive the economic and development policy options and choices we can make. Therefore, consolidating the science around environment, the development of policies, and also the ability of nations to cooperate will take an ever more significant role in the multilateral and United Nations system.
You've been at this for some time. You've made this your focus for a long time. This new report seems to have had a sobering effect on you yourself. What is this compendium, what does it contain that really got your attention? What was the scariest thing in it?
What the report that has looked at the latest scientific publications since the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change presented its report 2.5 years ago is a very simple message. It's faster, it's more serious, and on a scale that exceeds many of the modeling exercises we had at our disposal 3 to 4 years ago. Global warming is not a theoretical phenomenon that science is still trying to explore. It is a present and real danger to the lives as we know it today. And I think it is the realization that, for instance, in the lifetime of my son, possibly, sea levels will rise not just by 50 centimeters, but up to 2 meters. And all the implications that it has for people's livelihoods, for where we have developed our infrastructure on the coastlines, for land that will be lost, for the ability of millions of Bangladeshi citizens who will have to move because they're in the flood deltas that will be destroyed, the water aquifers that will be destroyed by saltwater intrusion. Life will change as we know it today at a time when really we are still trying to bring more than half the world's population to a living standard that at least ensures basic decent conditions for all of us on this planet. So we have a fundamental physical challenge, but we also have many options for reversing that trend. And to me, the report really does say to the world, look, do not hesitate on the science any longer. This is real. Focus on what can be done about it and accelerate what you're doing because we are behind the curve.
It says things are getting worse and they're getting worse faster. And yet nothing really substantial is being done yet. Is the human species really lemmings? Are we headed over the cliff?
No, and I actually believe we are rational people who have never been confronted with quite the choice that we now have to make, which is to fundamentally reinvent our economies and our societies. We forget sometimes that it's only 200-300 years since we were just 1 billion people on this planet. So we are many more people. We have to share many more resources. We've gone through an industrial revolution. We've suddenly developed the capacity to fundamentally affect the life support systems on our planet. The atmosphere, the hydrological cycle, where water comes from, where it goes to, pollution. All of this has put the planet under stress, and it has taken us a while to first of all have the science to understand it. Secondly, to also understand that it's a series of systems that we live in. We often talk about a social system and economic system. Well, there is a natural system out there of which we still know very little, but we are learning very fast that we have to understand it because we are causing things to happen we never anticipated. We have been slow for political reasons, for reasons of ignorance, sometimes simply because it's easier not to have to think about fundamental change. The simple fact is, yes, at the beginning of the 21st century, as a civilization, as an American, as an African, as a European, we have to rethink the future, not in terms of turning our lights off, but in terms of efficiency, in terms of reducing pollution, in terms of enabling 9 billion people to share the air, the earth, the water, the natural resources on this planet. And that means reinventing our economies. People have been slow, but I think we have a very different public awareness now. And in that sense, I remain optimistic, even if at the moment we are watching our leaders sometimes bicker over details, when in fact Copenhagen is the key to enabling a global partnership to emerge, without which we will not succeed.
Mr. Steiner, you said that common sense can triumph in the end. Do you think that common sense is enough to overcome special interests in Washington, in Berlin, in Beijing, in Tokyo, everywhere in the world, in Africa and South America, that are going to rise up and resist change because it will inconvenience their own concerns?
I think so. I mean, not all of us live perhaps in perfect democracies, but public choice and our political systems allow us to vote in one party or one leader and vote another one out. The United States has just voted in a leader who is explicitly and firmly committed to addressing climate change. Secondly, I think we would become the first generation that consciously is saying what we're going to leave to our children will actually be worse than what we inherited. Because the aspiration of every human being is to somehow make the lives of their children a better one than we have had. We are literally confronted right now with a scenario where if we do not act on climate change, the world that our children will have to live in will be condemned to being one that is worse than what we have today. That goes against every instinct, that goes against our ethics, our, in a sense, love and commitment to our children. And I think common sense also is driven by the fact that if somebody tells me we have a problem and here are some of the solutions, why would I not pick the solutions? You don't even have to believe in global warming to see the rationale of using less fossil fuel, energy security, less pollution. Why would you want to pay more for having the same quality of light in your room than if you were offered a light bulb that uses only 1/4 of the energy? You don't have to be a climate change guru or believer to see the economic rationale, the political rationale on acting on a lot of these issues. So yes, I think common sense is a way to say people are not stupid. If you present them with the evidence and you give them a number of solutions and they have a choice, I think most of the time we do make the right choice and we do not behave like lemmings.
Copenhagen, the green economy. The economy generally of the world has been pretty tumultuous in the last months. Is Copenhagen likely to kickstart the green economy again?
Well, in some respects you can look at Copenhagen as being affected by the financial crisis and therefore we don't have the money, we don't have the resources to act on it. I would argue the exact opposite. It may be the greatest stimulus package that we could think of in terms of the financial crisis, but also the economic recovery. Right now, UNEP has introduced internationally a concept of the transition towards a green economy, looking at different sectors where new jobs are being created, new technologies are being developed, new markets are emerging. And we have also put forward the concept of a global Green New Deal, inspired by one of your wonderful presidents in the United States of America, and the experience of acting in a crisis to try and inject transformational decisions and opportunities for the future. Right now, climate change, yes, is a threat to our future. But if you look at what the measures are, expanding forest cover on the planet, restoring wetlands, introducing more energy efficient technologies, rethinking mobility and transport, looking at renewable energy, which is free on the planet if only we can capture wind, solar and geothermal, then you can suddenly see that there is a tremendous innovation impulse that could come out of Copenhagen. We have already seen in the last few months China, Korea, the United States, Japan, Europe, declaring so-called Green New Deal packages as part of the financial and economic recovery packages. They are still too small, but they are already generating hundreds of thousands of jobs almost overnight, and the potential is in the millions. We have to employ tens of millions of people every year who arrive on our planet, who become part of the labor market. It's not going to happen in the sectors of yesterday that keep on reducing the number of people they employ. We have to create jobs that are part of the, let's say, restorative economy on our planet. And I think this is where climate change, the green economy, the financial crisis are not pulling us in opposite directions. They need the right policy framework, and they actually reinforce each other's ability to move us out of crisis into a more sustainable future.
Copenhagen is the place to seal the deal in December. That's a good, strong slogan. What exactly does it mean, seal the deal?
The Secretary General has appealed to the world's leaders, but also to the public, that in Copenhagen we are trying to negotiate a deal between the polluters of the past, the polluters of the future. In a sense, the people who cause the problem, those who are suffering the consequences of the problem. We are trying to negotiate a deal, and a deal means all sides have to walk away from Copenhagen feeling that it is a fair deal, an equitable deal. And some of the discussions that we're now having are precisely about what is fair to demand of developing nations that are still developing, were not the major contributors to the problem we have in the atmosphere now, but will be major emitters in the future. Seal the deal is the Secretary General's appeal to the leaders in the world to approach Copenhagen from a point of view of negotiating a fair outcome. And the campaign that the United Nations now has on the internet, sealthedeal2009.org, is also a petition in which the Secretary General has appealed to the public worldwide, sign up to this petition, show our political leaders that you as individuals, as citizens, as voters, are behind your political leaders when they will make decisions for the future in Copenhagen.
Do you mean by seal the deal have a agreement signed by 192 nations, participating nations?
We have been preparing for this for 2 decades. We have been preparing through negotiations for over 3 years. I think anybody who right now is beginning to caution the world and say, well, maybe we'll have something and we'll work more afterwards, is in a sense distracting from, yes, we have a moment in history. It is December 2009. It could have been January 2010. It's not that that day is the only day we have, but we have invested so much as a world community, as scientists, as businesses, as governments, into reaching an agreement in Copenhagen, that anybody who now tries to say, well, let's see whether we can, agree on some things and then move on, there is no plan B. There is no plan B. If 190 nations do not agree in Copenhagen to support each other, to work in partnership in addressing global warming, yes, maybe we'll meet again in 5 years. But none of us can afford that bill, because the bill is simply going to be even higher and some things even less reversible. So I look to Copenhagen as a deal that actually puts a number of things in place. Do we have room afterwards to work on the details? Yes, but the principal elements of a deal must be in place. Otherwise, we will have wasted the world's time, and we will allow some nations to continue doing things that will affect the majority of the world's population in a negative way, and with no solution in sight.
Mr. Steiner, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world. To learn more, visit linktv.org.